Hey everyone, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video we're going to be doing our driving comparison between the all-new 2022 Honda Passport TrailSport and a 2022 Toyota 4Runner TRD Pro. Before we get into the video though, as always, if you want to save time and money the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below. Let's get into the driving. Talk about visibility here in the Passport. You guys can see visibility of the hood, both of the mirrors, and throughout the rest of the rear. And let's set off. So setting off here in the Passport, and I'll be making most of the comparisons to the vehicles in the 4Runner driving portion, because obviously that would be me having driven both of them rather than just driving this one, even though I own the 4Runner. But still, let's talk about how the Passport drives. So first off, it feels just like any other unibody SUV with independent front and rear suspension. Handling's really good. It's my tripod, don't worry. Yeah, handling turn-in's really good. Seat cover's actually really good too in the Passport as well. I like the padding on these seats. It's kind of nice. This armrest thing is kind of interesting. It's like a Honda thing to have these armrests because of how they do their center consoles. But I appreciate that they actually have an armrest. You can move it out of the way if you want, but it's definitely just a nice thing to have. Now this does have a sport mode. I can pop it into like an S mode, and that is basically the sport mode for the Passport. I do think the gauge cluster also looks pretty cool with the animation for the RPMs as well with the Passport. Man, I must have decided to go when there's a lot of traffic or something here. Other stuff over interior feel, it's kind of like a mix. It looks like they basically tried to take a modern interior and make it look rugged in a sense, if that makes sense, with like the material use and the coloration and everything. But overall, I think the material use is actually pretty decent. Looks like it's going to hold up pretty well over time overall. But you can definitely tell that this is like a modern vehicle. That's something that I want to emphasize, is that even though there's a lot of plastic controls and everything, like, you can tell it's modern. Now other stuff, this is cool that it has the steering assistance. The 4Runner doesn't have that as a feature, so that's definitely a nice thing to have. And you guys saw the acceleration. I mean, that wasn't like full throttle. We'll do a full throttle here. It's pretty dang seamless. Gear shifts are pretty smooth with the 9-speed as well. And yeah, I mean, so far it's just a very nice driving crossover. So we'll go full throttle here. Yeah, pretty solid. The gear shifts are really seamless. It's a manual mode. Yeah, gear shifts are really smooth. How do I get, oh, there you go. Just hold down plus paddle and that'll put you back into automatic mode. You can take it out of the S mode. So yeah, let's kind of get into setting things up here with the Passport TrailSport from a driving perspective on road. And I just want to let you guys know, I haven't taken this off-road yet. I will be doing that this weekend. And so I can't really give you guys impressions in terms of how this drives as an off-roader, but I can make some assumptions. I don't want to make any assumptions about the all-wheel drive system from a traction perspective, but based on the fact that this is unibody with independent front and rear suspension, means it's probably not going to have a lot of articulation off-road, which means it's going to be pretty limited in terms of what it can do. Also, 8.1 inches of ground clearance is decent. I mean, a lot of old school off-roaders, that's all they had, but in terms of modern figures, that's nothing. The 4Runner, again, if you guys saw the walk-around video, 9.6 inches of ground clearance, and there's a lot of off-roaders nowadays that have, you know, 11, 12, 13, 14, even 15 inches of ground clearance. So yeah, this is good, but in terms of modern standards, it's not like, you know, it's not crazy. Ride comfort though on road is great. Seat comfort's really good as well. Again, pretty modern feeling cabin. And so yeah, if you just want kind of like basically what this gives you, what I'm noticing so far until we make some comparisons to the 4Runner, more comparisons to the 4Runner, is a modern feeling interior and driving experience. And this basically is just like every other modern crossover. It just happens to have slightly more rugged looks and the TrailSport name and slightly more aggressive tires. But other than that, it pretty much, why are you giving me a brake warning? That was weird. It pretty much just feels like any other crossover. So if you've driven a modern crossover, you've pretty much driven the TrailSport. Now, I have heard a lot of talk about Honda's all-wheel drive system, how it's super advanced and can just do crazy stuff. So I'm excited to see how that actually performs in off-road circumstances. But I can tell you on-road is grip feels great, turn-in feels great with the independent suspension, and it drives like a modern crossover. Well, let's talk about visibility before we set off in the 4Runner. Here's visibility of the hood. Both mirrors do have blind spot monitoring. And throughout the rest of the rear. And let's set off. Okay, so starting off in the 4Runner and roughly the same area. We're just a little bit behind compared to where the Passport started. Anyways, let's talk about how this drives compared to the Passport. First off, seat comfort. The seats are a little bit softer in the 4Runner, frankly. Like the padding just seems to be a little bit better compared to the Passport. The Passport seats are just a little bit harder. Not a big deal though. I think both seats are pretty comfortable. Now, one thing to mention is this steering wheel is so much bigger. I'm not sure how to feel about that. I usually don't care too much about steering wheels in SUVs or crossovers too much. But yeah, you can definitely feel like a substantial difference in just steering wheel size. This is like just like the diameter is bigger, it seems like, and then also just like the width of the wheel itself is also quite a bit bigger. That is a cool looking truck. Anyways, drives so much different. Like, it's crazy the difference in driving with these vehicles. Again, the Passport with its independent front rear suspension drives like many other modern crossovers. This has independent front suspension but a solid rear axle, and it's body on frame instead of unibody. And so this has more of a truck-like feel to it from a driving perspective, but obviously it's an SUV. But this being like smaller in size compared to a lot of full-size pickup trucks, right, that are, you know, the vehicles in the market that still have body and frame construction, just feels so different. Now, I bet if we put these up against each other in a drag race, this probably would lose. It doesn't feel too much slower, but it's, yeah, that 5-speed definitely is not as refined as the 9-speed in the Passport. And yeah, I mean, it's just, power figures are pretty similar, but this, I'm assuming this weighs quite a bit more than the Passport because it just seems like it's a slightly larger vehicle. Ride quality is amazing though. You'd think that this wouldn't ride very well because the fact that it's body on frame and solid rear axle versus the independent rear suspension in the Passport. But this actually rides exceptionally well. Now, a big part of that, I'm sure, is the Fox shocks on this particular package because this is a TRD Pro. You don't get weird like side-to-side travel with the shocks, but like it's just smooth, and you got a ton of sidewall on the tires too. But I will say I do feel kind of a little bit more happening with the front end on this versus the Passport. But going over bumps, I will say this definitely has a lot less happen with it, and that's the benefit of body on frame and then you know, having the beefed up shocks that this has, right? Versus just having more standard crossover suspension and shocks like what the Passport has. This definitely feels a lot taller in terms of like your seating position. Like I feel like I'm sitting down in the Passport, if that makes sense, whereas this, I feel like I'm sitting up on top of something. Yeah, train tracks really show the shock difference there. So yeah, let's sum things up here. So exterior wise, I think it's going to come down to personal preference. Some people like the more modern aesthetics of like regular crossovers versus some people might like this. This kind of has more of like that old school, kind of like almost military theme to it in terms of the styling on the outside. And then interior, again, this has more of a utilitarian old school interior versus the Passport has kind of like more modern interior. So it just depends on which one you like more from that perspective. I love the sound of this. This sounds way better than the Passport with that TRD exhaust. And the 4-liter is just, yeah, such a monstrous engine. Yeah, I mean, really, I mean, obviously, like, I'm kind of Slightly biased because obviously I own this, I will admit that, and I obviously picked this over buying a Passport. But what I can tell you is this feels like a more unique driving experience compared to the Passport. The Passport, I basically feel like I'm in every other crossover, whereas this feels like a 4Runner. Like it has this own distinct driving feel, which again, it's kind of, it's unique. It's fun. So yeah, I mean, basically if you want you want all the benefits of a modern crossover in terms of like a more modern interior, driving experience, handling, but you want something that looks cool, the Passport TrailSport gives that to you. If you want a more rugged, old school feel, the 4Runner gives that to you. Now again, I haven't taken the Passport off-road yet, so I can't comment, but this has quite a bit more ground clearance, 9.6 inches. It's got more aggressive tires that have more sidewall, and it has a solid rear axle. I think it's pretty safe to assume that this is gonna be able to handle way more than the Passport would be able to handle off-road. So if you're actually into off-roading, this one's gonna have more capability, and the shocks too. Like the Passport is basically, you know, as much as I hate to say it, it's basically just some tires thrown onto a regular crossover, whereas this is like purpose built for off-roading. That's kind of the difference between both of them. Let me know which one you guys would pick after seeing the driving.